Scarlet and Violet may be very glitchy and perform terribly, but I've also spent a terribly long time playing them, hundreds of hours, and of course that means there's a bunch of designs I like. Before getting into the list, I want to give one honourable mention: Blood Moon Ursaluna. It's a different form of a Gen 8 Pokemon, so I don't think I can count it, but just know that I named mine Zombear, and it's one of my favourite Pokemon now. Also, not counting legendaries, as that could be its own list at some point. Anyway, to the list. I think Cyclizar looks like a fantastic non-legendary version of the box art legendaries for Scarlet and Violet. It's also such a simple design in terms of it not having a bunch of unneeded extra details. It's kept very smooth looking, and I think it works well for the idea behind this Pokemon. It's unfortunately not one I've used on my team though. After not being a big fan of any Gen 8 starter, it was really refreshing to get a starter I love. I do understand the relationship between birds and crocs, but I'm never the biggest fan of multiple beings being classed as a single Pokemon, so that's the big downside for me. Plus the design does admittedly have a lot of different concepts it covers, and it can be a bit much to look at sometimes, but the fact that I have any issues with it, and yet it's still one of my favourites, shows that I really love the aspects I think it does well. It's also nice to have a new non-firefighting starter I actually like. Incineroar is basically firefighting with how it looks, and I didn't like Cinderace, and I'm kinda mixed on Delphox, so it's just a nice change of pace for me. I have always loved Donphan, and initially I thought I liked Great Tusk more. I don't. Each year, Donphan rises in my ranks of favourite Pokemon. That said, Great Tusk is a more primal looking Donphan, and I love that. It's the only Paradox Pokemon on this list, the only other ones I'm a big fan of being Roaring Moon and Slitherwing, unless you count the box legends. Helping out a Gen 2 Pokemon I think is extremely underrated, and while not entirely what I was expecting, I still love this. I expected the Tailhead to take over more, and it does, but as a hood, instead of getting rid of the giraffe like I thought it would. Honestly, I love this choice. It's also actually tall, and I don't know much about giraffes. If there's one thing I think I know about them, it's that they're meant to be tall. Mabostiff is a strange case. I was already using it on my team before I even knew about Arven's storyline. I'm a big dog lover, but the storyline with Arven just made me feel like the Pokemon seemed even more real than ever before. Dashbone was the first fully evolved Pokemon I saw that my eyes immediately were drawn to. It's simple and sweet, pun fully intended. I don't know how to explain it, but just looking at it initially, I thought, this is an instant classic for me. And it just felt like the perfect design for the concept. There's legitimately nothing I changed design-wise here. So, yeah, the top 5 is extremely tough competition for me. Third dog in a row, and probably only the last one because there's no more dog lines in this game, Paldea nailed all the dog designs. Houndstone is a ghost dog, and that concept alone makes me a little sad. But I think design-wise, while not terrifying by any means, it's one of the only Pokemon that feels uneasy for me to look at. Its proportions and skeleton design with massive hair loss makes it genuinely uncomfortable for me to look at. And I love it. It's a ghost type that actually makes me feel a bit weird, and yeah, I would still be friends with it in a heartbeat. Damn good design. Well, it was bound to get very controversial at some point. I was never the biggest Dunsparce fan. I guess the joke Pokemon concept didn't go far enough for me, but this being designed decades after the original Dunsparce, after fans expected some badass dragon for some reason, makes it such a great silly Pokemon to me. Plus its name is just more duh. It definitely doesn't hurt that within an hour of hunting for a shiny Dunsparce and evolving them, I got a shiny free segment to Dunsparce, which I used on my second playthrough of these games, and he was actually really good in game. Love this silly little guy and would love to get a plushie of it, especially if by some miracle they did a shiny free segment to Dunsparce plush. I, like I imagine many people were, was confused by this design at first. It's just Finazum with a heart on its chest, but it didn't take me long to realise, oh, it's disguising itself as a regular Finazon, but it has its logo on its chest, much like a superhero, and, much like Superman, has to get out of view and return to show the true hero form. Genius. I've wanted a dolphin Pokemon for so long, not so much because I like dolphins, I'm more obsessed with penguins and dogs, but because new animals and concepts are always interesting to see Pokemon cover. The superhero concept won't be for everyone, but I love that it's just a regular looking dolphin form. I'm not always a huge fan of humanoid designs, so I think it helps a lot that we get to see a more normal looking dolphin to begin all fights with before the absolute unit comes out. When these games were initially announced and people worked out where the games would be located, I tried to think of animals I'd like to see get covered, and along with me wanting more dog Pokemon, I wanted an Iberian ribbed newt. I've handled one in real life and I loved it, so taking Wooper/Quagsire and adjusting its design to become this little goofy guy, perfect. He's just so soft looking and I just want to be his friend and hug him and feed him and be his friend and In fact, the only thing I've ever ordered from the Pokemon Center is a plushie of this Pokemon from the Comfy Friends line. Just because I want to hug him so much. It's just a shame Clodsire isn't real because me and him would be such good friends. Anyway, that's all for this video. Please consider liking, commenting and subscribing as it all helps out my channel a lot with this YouTube algorithm stuff. And yeah, that's all. Bye I guess.